Good morning. And to deliver our opening remarks, may we welcome our Assistant Director, Marie Camille Castillo.
Hello. Magandang umaga po. Can you hear me, Emma? Hello. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Good morning, everybody. I hope that everyone's okay. Everyone is in good health. And thank you. Thank you for joining us today, this morning, for our 8th Consumer Care webinar. If you have noticed po, we have started earlier. We started at 9:30. We decided to move it at an early time so that we can provide more time for our consumers to ask questions and clarify. So our first session will be at 9:30 to 11. And then we will request the consumers to leave the meeting because we will have our own discussion together with our colleagues from the DTI and other government offices. So our session, our consumer care webinar will be in two parts today and in the coming days on Thursday and the other Tuesdays and Thursdays. Okay. Now, our topic for today is very important. When we were under community quarantine, uh, this topic has been in the priority of the Department of Trade and Industry, especially for the Consumer Protection Group. Now, standards is very important to make sure that our particular products that we use under the community quarantine are safe. And we are very happy to bring to you today the Bureau of Philippine Standards to discuss this. So on behalf of our Undersecretary, Attorney Ruth B. Castello, our Assistant Secretary, Attorney Ann Cabuchan, our Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau Director, Attorney Mel Pershumpula, and the other directors of the Consumer Protection Group, uh, Director Neil Tatahay and Director Ronel Abranica. I welcome you this morning and please listen to our speakers for today. Magandang umaga po.
Magandang umaga. Thank you, Ms. Camille. And as she mentioned a while ago, the topic for today is safety standards on PPEs and related products. Our speaker this morning is our division chief from the Standards Development Division of the Bureau of Philippine Standards. He's a very able resource person, an expert on this matter. May we welcome Mr. Mario Gaudiano. Sir Mario.
Yeah, maraming salamat, Emma. Thank you very much, si Pao, for my webinar series. For today is definitely among the most important things na nawala panahon ng pandemic katulad po nitong COVID-19, no? So alam naman po natin bago ng COVID-19, pumutok muna yung Taal Volcano, nagkaroon tayo ng shortage ng PPEs, particularly the face mask. But the face mask that we required during the Taal Volcano eruption is only more on respiratory, no? Pero hindi natin kasi inaasahan na darating yung COVID-19. Kaya pagdating ng COVID-19, nagkaroon pa rin tayo ng shortage ng face mask, but this time is the surgical mask. So ang ginawa po ng Bureau of Philippine Standards for us to address the issues on maaaring pag-proliferate ng substandards face mask and PPEs in the Philippines, we immediately contacted the Department of Health, particularly the Food Drug Administration, if we could adapt the standards that will suit the Philippine setting. Kaya nga, noong mga panahon na yon, March, April, we were able to adopt 57 standards related to personal protective equipment, particularly for the use of our frontliners in the hospital. So for us to understand what are these PPEs na meron tayo, my technical staff, Engineer Rachel P. Doc, will present to you the different PPEs and the different standards that we have adopted for the Philippines. Rachel?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sir Mag. Naririnig niyo naman po ako?
Yes, Rachel,
Yes,
loud
yes,
and
we can hear
clear.
you.
Yes.
So, good morning, everyone. Good morning po sa lahat ng mga directors po natin from the Department of Trade and Industry na present ngayon sa ating webinar. And then good morning din po sa mga taga DTI regional offices and sa public listeners or viewers po natin. So I am Rachel Jean Pido from the Standards Development Division of the Bureau of Philippine Standards. I am a technical officer handling several BPS technical committees, particularly the BPS TC56 on personal protective equipment. So I am with the director of the BPS, Mr. Neil P. Katahay, Division Chief of Standards Development, Engineer Mario Gaudiano, Division Chief of Standards Mainstreaming Division, Engineer Maria Teresita Del Rosario, and the officer in charge of Standards Conformity Division, Ms. Maricel A. Redrica. So considering po the objective of this webinar, which is to inform the general public of the safety standards, yung binigay sa aming topic, standards on PPE and related products, I will be presenting the Philippine National Standards on personal protective equipment and other related standards adopted by BPS for COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. So, okay. Next slide, please. So let me start my presentation po. Balik mo lahat. Let me start my presentation by introducing the Bureau of Philippine Standards of the Department of Trade and Industry, since I was informed na hindi lang mga taga DTI regional offices ang participants po natin. So for the public po, BPS is the national standards body of the Philippines that is mandated to develop, promulgate, and implement standards for all products in the Philippines. So BPS promotes standardization activities in the country and ensures the manufacture, production, distribution of quality products for the protection of the consumer. So BPS po has identified several international standards, ISO and EN standards on personal protective equipment for eye protection, face mask, respiratory protective devices, protective clothing, and medical gloves in March and April 2020. The urgent need to adopt these 19 standards as PNS was identified to help address the outbreak of COVID-19 in the Philippines. So nakikita nyo po sa screen yung iba't ibang standards natin. We have for eye protection, TNS EN 166. For face mask, we have PNS EN 149, PNS EN 14683. For protective clothing, we have several po. We have PNS EN 13795-1 and -2, PNS EN 14126 for protective clothing against infective agents, PNS EN 14605, PNS ISO 19918, PNS ISO 22610. So meron din po tayong for medical gloves. So later po, iisa-isahin natin yung mga standards. We will share brief information lang po doon sa lahat ng standards na present ko po ngayon sa inyo. Aside from that, so next slide. Aside from the PNS adopted last March and April 2020, our technical committee, the BPSTC 56, who is responsible for standardization on the performance of personal protective equipment designed to safeguard wearers against all known possible hazards, has also adopted several international standards on protective clothing in 2015. So makikita nyo po dyan, mga 2015 pa po yung mga standards na na-adapt natin. We have PNS ISO 13688 for general requirements ng protective clothing. Meron din po tayong several test methods para din po sa protective clothing din natin. From PNS ISO 6530, PNS ISO 13994, PNS ISO 16602, 603, 604. So iba't ibang test methods lang po ito for our protective clothing. So we also have other PNS for face mask na adopted na po in 2015. Another test method din po siya. So in the next slides po, I will share some information on several PNS for PPEs, particularly the classification, some requirements, test methods, and markings. So yung may mga makikita po kayong ilang pictures sa aking presentation, that's kinuha po siya sa internet and then yung sa isang document na pre-provide ni FDA and sa amin. First standard po is PNS EN 14683, which is the medical face mask requirements and test methods, kung saan ito po yung pinaka-importante sa atin ngayong may COVID pandemic pa rin po tayo. So this standard specifies construction, design, performance requirements, and test methods for medical face masks intended to limit the transmission of infective agents from staff to patients during surgical procedure and other medical settings with similar requirements. So this is not applicable to masks intended exclusively for the personal protection of staff. We have three types po ng mask according to these standards. We have type 1, medical face mask, which are used for patients in order to reduce the risk of the spread of infections, particularly in epidemic or pandemic situation. Type 2 masks are principally intended for use by healthcare professionals in an operating room or other medical settings with similar requirements. Type 2R naman po ay yung may splash resistance capability na. So siya yung may pinaka-requirement na dapat mag-undergo siya ng splash resistant test. Next is, so yung standard po natin, PNS 14683, we have has test requirements on bacterial filtration efficiency. So dapat dumaan siya sa mga ganitong test, differential pressure, splash resistance pressure, microbial cleanliness, biocompatibility. So makikita niyo po sa screen yung mga sample figures ng mga apparatus for the test methods. So right now po, there are no accredited testing lab on PAB registry. However, yung BFP, breathability, microbial cleanliness, splash resistance, biocompatibility were included in the proposed project of the PTRI, DOST PTRI Medical Textile Testing Laboratory. Next po is, last for this standard is the marking. So, ang importanteng makita natin for this standard is yung number of this standard nakalagay doon sa mask natin and yung type of mask. Kung makikita nyo po sa table 1, dyan makikita kung paano masasabing type 1, type 2, and type 2R yung mga face mask natin. So, pag halimbawa greater than or equal to 95% yung bacterial filtration efficiency natin, and then less than 40 yung differential pressure, and then less than or equal to 30 yung microbial cleanliness, that would be the type 1 medical face mask according to 14683. Next na standard po natin is the PNS EN 149 2020 respiratory protective devices filtering half mask to protect against particles, requirements, testings, and marking. So this standard specifies minimum requirements for filtering half mask as respiratory protective devices to protect against particle except for escape purposes. So laboratory and practical performance are included. We have, for classification po, we have two types. So one is based on penetration resistance of the filter material. FFP1 is yung 80% yung penetration resistance niya. FFP2, 94%. FFP3, 99%. And another classification is based on frequency of use. Yung single shift use only, NR, and reusable, R naman. So kung mapapansin niyo po, meron tayong mga tinatawag na N95 mask, KN95 mask. So sa mga article na mga bababasa nyo tungkol dun sa mga recommended mask protective devices for PPEs, makikita nyo rin po si EN149 FFP2. Kumbaga, parehas po siya doon sa N95 ng NIOSH kasi may another standards naman po tayo which is ginagamit ng US. And then another po is yung sa China naman na KN95 na 95% din po yung kanyang filtering capability. So ito po yung for EN149, ito po yung test requirements niya. So medyo madami-dami po yung required test for this respiratory protective device. Hindi ko na din po siya iisa-isahin. For the marking po, so we have marking on packaging and then dun sa mismo on the mask. So sa packaging, we have to check if may name siya, trademark or other means of identification of the manufacturer or supplier, yung type, class, FFP1, FFP2, kung single shift use only or usable, the number and year of publication of the standard, end of shelf life, and meron din pong additional information na isusupplied yung mga manufacturer and condition of storage. So for sa mismong mask po, required ang name, trademark, other means of identification of the manufacturer or supplier, type, class, tulad din po nung kanina, the number and year of publication of this standard. Another PPE po natin is surgical drapes and gowns. So we have PNS EN 13795-1. So this document specifies information to be supplied to users and third-party verifiers in addition to the usual labeling of medical devices concerning manufacturing and processing requirements. So this document gives information on the characteristics of single-use and reusable surgical gowns and surgical drapes used as medical devices for patients, clinical staff, and equipment intended to prevent the transmission of infective agents between clinical staff and patients during surgical and other invasive procedures. So we have two types po sa classification natin. One is the standards performance, classification addressing minimum performance requirements for various characteristics of products used as medical devices in invasive surgical procedure, while yung high performance po is yung addressing elevated performance requirements for various characteristics of products po. For test requirements, we have 9. Microbial penetration dry and wet, cleanliness microbial or bioburden, particle release, liquid penetration, bursting strength, dry, wet, tensile strength, dry, and wet. So again po, there are no accredited testing lab pero merong proposed project si PTRI for this testing laboratories. So this document, EN 13795, also specify several information to be supplied with the product characterized namely as meron pong sinasabi yung standard natin na mga information na dapat i-provide sa user and then yung information na dapat i-provide sa processor. So for example po, for the information to be supplied to the user, yung the request or information on the test methods, the result of testing and test condition for the characteristic. The manufacturer shall inform the user of residual risk due to any shortcomings of the protection measure adopted. And the manufacturer shall provide information on the flammability of the products and fire risk in relation with it on request. So for the information to be supplied naman po to the processor, for reusable products, the manufacturer shall obtain information to be supplied to the processor on the number of reuses based on standardized process, together with information and measures for maintaining the technical and functional safety of the medical device and packaging. For products to be thermally sterilized, the manufacturer shall supply instruction for the sterilization process to be applied. Next pong standard natin is the PNSEN 14126, Performance Requirements and Test Methods for Protective Clothing Against Infective Agent. So, ito po yung may mga requirements and test methods for reusable and limited use protective clothing, providing protection against infective agents. So, hindi po covered nito yung clothing worn by surgical teams, drapes laid on patients to prevent cross-contamination during surgical intervention. So makikita nyo po, merong scope yung mga standards natin. So may mga kina-cover, may mga standard na nagpo-provide kung ano yung hindi nila kina-cover, like PNSEN 14126. So yung test requirements po under PNSEN 146, we have resistance to penetration by contaminated liquids under hydrostatic pressure, infective agents due to mechanical contact with substance containing contaminated liquids, contaminated liquid aerosols, contaminated solid particles, and resistance to wet bacterial barrier penetration. So pinaka-importante po sa atin is yung marking. So the clothing shall be marked in accordance with the applicable requirements of the relevant standard for chemical protective clothing. Kung example po, kung meron tayong ginamit na ibang standards, then meron din mga marking requirements. So kailangan din pong makita sa protective clothing natin yon. The marking of protective clothing against infective agents shall contain the following information. So importante po yung number of this standard, EN 146, type of protective clothing as specified in Table 5 sa laman ng standard po, and pictogram, like this one po na naka-show sa screen. Next po is the PNSEN 14605. So ito naman po is yung minimum requirements for the following types of limited use and reusable chemical protective clothing. So may iba't ibang protective clothing po tayong nabanggit sa standard na to. One is yung full body protective clothing, type 3, yung liquid type clothing, while type 4 po is yung spray type clothing. Examples po niyan are yung one-piece coveralls or two-piece suits, with or without hood or visors, with or without boot socks, or over boots, or with or without gloves. So, for partial body protection garments naman po, offering protection to specific parts of the body against permeation of liquid, ang example po natin dyan is yung laboratory coats, jackets, trousers, aprons, sleeves, and hoods. Under PNSEN 14605, ito po yung mga requirements, test methods na required po ng standards natin. So, hindi ko na po siya iisa-isahin. Next. And then another is yung mga marking. marking requirements din po. So marking na under EN 14605 shall be clearly visible and as durable as adequate for the life of clothing. So meron din po siya ng name, trademark, or other means of identification of the manufacturer. Again, yung type ng chemical protective clothing, just like po yung sa mask natin. Yung number and date of publication of document, year of manufacture, manufacturer's type, identification or model, size range, since clothing siya, pictograph. For reusable clothing, care programs according to a specific standard, and for limited use clothing, a warning sentence, do not reuse, since isang beses lang siya dapat gamitin. Okay. So next, standard po natin is yung PNS ISO 16602. So this standard establishes minimum performance classification and labeling requirements for protective clothing design to provide protection against chemicals. So protective clothing items covered by this standard include but may not be limited to totally encapsulating suits, liquid tight or spray tight suits, coveralls, jackets, trousers, aprons, smocks, hood sleeves, and shoe and boot covers. So meron din po tayong iba't ibang klase ng chemical protective suit according to this standard. So type 1 is for gas type, na meron ding 3 types. Type A1A, type 1B, type 1C. So yung type 1A po is protective suit with a breathing air supply that is independent of the ambient atmosphere worn inside the suit. While yung type 1B naman po is yung worn outside the suit. Type 1C is protective suit with external source of breathable air providing positive pressure against inside the suit. Then we have type 2 for non-gas type, type 3 liquid type, type 4 spray type, type 5 chemical protective clothing providing protection against airborne solid chemicals. For type 6 naman po with limited protective performance against liquid chemicals. So example po natin for type 3 to type 6, we have one-piece coverall or two-piece suit with or without hood or visor, or with or without boot socks. For partial body po, partial body chemical protective clothing, protective clothing that does not provide full body coverage, like yung apron natin, boots or shoe cover. So ito po naman yung mga required test, specific performance test under PNS ISO 16602. So hindi ko na din po siya iisa-isahin. And then another po is the labeling requirements under 16602. So importante pa din po yung name, trademark, or other means for identifying the manufacturer, yung manufacturer's type number or identification or model number, type of chemical protective clothing, yung nabanggit ko po kanina na type 1 to type 6 or partial body, and the rest po. Similar doon sa mga labeling requirements ng other PPE standard po natin. Next pong standard is yung PNS ISO 13688, which is the general requirements for protective clothing. So this standard specifies general performance requirements for ergonomics, innocuousness, size designation, aging, compatibility, and marking of protective clothing, and the information to be supplied by the manufacturer with the protective clothing. So, ito po ay dapat gamitin, itong standards na to ay dapat gamitin in combination with other standards containing requirements for specific protective performance and not on a standalone basis. So, ito po yung mga markings niya. Similar din po siya doon sa markings na present ko sa inyo sa other PPE. Next product, PPE product po natin is yung PNS ISO 21420, Protective Gloves, General Requirements, and test method. So itong standards po na to ay nag-specify ng general requirements and relevant test procedure po for glove design and construction, comfort and efficiency, as well as marking and information supplied by the manufacturer to all protective gloves. So in order, ang test methods na under po dito ay yung determining glove finger dexterity, determination of water vapor behavior, and water vapor absorption of leather materials. So yun po. And yun, ano din po, meron ding nakaspecify yung standards natin ng mga marking, particularly for glove and marking doon sa packaging. Aside po doon sa PNS ISO 21420, we also adopted the PNS EN 455. So ito naman po ay yung for medical gloves for single use. We have 3 parts para sa iba't ibang testing po. One is for freedom from holes, testing for physical properties, and testing for biological evaluation. Last PPE product po is yung NSEN 166, Personal Eye Protection Specification. So EN 166 specifies functional requirements for various type of personal eye protectors. So ano po ba yung types of eye protector natin? So the first, we have spectacles with or without lateral protection, goggles, face shields. And the function of eye protectors is to provide protection against the impacts of different severities, optical radiation, molten metals, dust, gases, short-circuit electric arc, or any combination of these. And last po na markings na represent ko sa inyo ay for EN 166. So all markings shall be clear and permanent. The marking shall be fully visible when the complete eye protector is assembled and shall not encroach into the minimum field of vision. The frame and ocular shall be marked separately. If the ocular and frame from a single unit, the complete marking shall be applied to the frame. The manufacturer's identification mark shall be included in the marking in the position shown and may consist of one or more elements. So for other Philippine national standards po natin, we have standards for security and resilience or risk management. So nung naglabas po yung ISO ng list, ISO and IEC na mga list na pwedeng gamitin natin for COVID-19, si BPS po ay nag-initiate to adopt those standards po. Next. We also have standards for anesthetic and respiratory equipment. So yan po yung list natin. Another po is biological evaluation of medical devices, quality management system for medical devices, which unti-untiin na pong i-implement ng Food and Drug Administration para doon sa kanilang mga regulations para maisama. Biotechnology. Meron din po tayong several standards for medical electrical equipment. So, yan po. So, if you may check the complete list of the standards on the link showing po in the screen. So, yung pong lahat na present kong standards sa inyo, the implementation of that standards will be voluntary unless otherwise referred in a technical regulation issued by a competent authority or in a contract between a manufacturer, retailer, and buyer. So right now po kasi, dahil nakikipag-meeting naman po kami sa DOH FDA, consider din po nila yung mga Philippine national standards natin on their regulation. So FDA has several regulations po, like yung FDA Circular number 2020-018, interim guidelines of the importation and manufacture of PPE ventilators and respirators to be used in the COVID-19 pandemic. So last May 26, 2020 po nila inisyu yun. Another regulation of FDA is the FDA Circular Number 2020-001, yung initial implementation of Administrative Order Number 2018-002. So guidelines governing the issuance of an authorization for a medical device based on the ASEAN Harmonized Technical Requirements issued last January 2020. And then we have AO number 2018-002, guidelines governing the issuance of an authorization for a medical device based on the ASEAN Harmonized Technical Requirements. So BPS po is coordinating with the different bureaus of DTI like Board of Investments, Philippine Accreditation Bureau kasi meron din po silang mga project related to PPEs. And also, nakikipag-coordinate din po kami sa United Nations Development Program for their project on enhanced local manufacturing to address supply chain constraints. And Food and Drug Administration po particularly, kasi kung may mga need pa tayong mga standards na dapat ma-adapt for our current situation po, na pwedeng makatulong. So for the free copy of the Philippine National Standards po, since libre siya sa atin ngayon sa BPS, you may call 7791-3127 and email us at bps@dti.gov.ph. For more information on standards and standardization, visit the DTI BPS portal at http://www.bps.gov.ph and follow our Facebook page. Paki-follow po yung Facebook namin at https://www.facebook.com/phstandard. So as consumer po, ugaliin natin, wag lang tingnan ng presyo, pati na rin ang kalidad ng mga produkto sa merkado. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Engineer Rachel. Certainly, we learned a lot about PPEs based on the discussion from Engineer Rachel. We knew that the PPEs such as face mask, surgical gowns and drapes, and protective gloves, meron silang classifications, test specifications, meron din silang mga marking requirements. So it's rather technical, but it's good to know. Before we proceed with the question and answer, allow me to inform you that during the registration meron pong mga participants who posted their questions already. So we will discuss them first and allow our experts from BPS to reply to the queries, to the questions, and then susunod po yung pong mga tanong ng ating consumers and businesses. So we will follow po that format para namang sa ganon, in order po yung pagsagot ng ating mga experts. Thank you so much.